Hey everybody, welcome to the 1947 Rise podcast, a podcast that helps India born, US trained Indians get integrated into the Indian technology ecosystem and inspires them to move back to India to build massive tech companies and or help enable the tech ecosystem. We do this by interviewing India born, US trained Indians who have moved back to India and built massive tech companies themselves and or helped enable the tech ecosystem. I'm excited to have Salone Sehgal on the 1947 Rise podcast. Salone is the founder and GP of Lumikai Fund. Lumikai is India's first gaming and interactive entertainment venture fund. The fund has made investments in the companies like Loco, Bombay Play, All Star Games, to name a few. Prior to starting Lumikai, Saloni worked in investment banking, was a founder, and worked at London Venture Partners. Welcome to the show, Saloni.
Well, thank you so much, Shiva, for having me. It's a really glad and really thrilled to be here.
Absolutely, let's do this. So, why don't you start by giving us your background, your journey of growing up in India and then moving to UK and then moving back to India? What made you move back to India?
Sure. Well, largely the market opportunity and landscape, but I guess let me cycle back a little bit and start from where I come from. So I've grown up in Delhi. I've grown up here. I did my undergrad here, and of course, my my schooling here as well. And I come from a family of entrepreneurs. My parents were entrepreneurial and first generation entrepreneurs. And because of that, they saw a fair share of both immense success and failure. Both my parents were stockbrokers, and my mother was actually India's first technical stock analyst and was awarded a Mahila Shiromani Award from the First Lady back in 1990, and even wrote a book on technical stock analysis and charting. So banking, finance, investing were dinner table conversations at home. And hence, in my mind, all my life choices were culmination of the experiences I had at home, building a strong foundation in finance, then setting up my own company, and then finally embarking down the path of investments and venture capital. I started my career in India, and for the first 6 to 7 years, I spent in investment banking and private equity. Again, split a few years in India, and then I moved abroad overseas. I worked with Morgan Stanley, Barclays, and with a private equity fund called Good Energies, and amassed over $10 billion in M&A experience. After that, I ended up building a company, and I was co-founder and CEO of Truly Social, which was a venture-backed gaming studio, building immersive social worlds for female audiences. And I ran that company for 4 years, and that was again in the UK. And uh, after 4 years, I ended up actually joining my investors, a fund called London Venture Partners, which was a fund which essentially pioneered investing in gaming and interactive as an asset class with a focus on Europe and North America. And I worked with them and known them for a very long time. But to I guess circa 2019, what I'd started to notice was that the India market had really transformed, and I started seeing a lot of deal flow come to me at LVP from India. And at that point of time, there was no dedicated sector focused fund for gaming and interactive. And hence, it sparked the idea in me that there could be the potential of a fund, VC fund focused on that sector in India. And I tracked the market for a very long time, and India had just about hit inflection points. And having seen the journeys of markets like China and Turkey, sitting from abroad, I could see those markers, those very similar trends that I was mapping in global markets take place in India, and hence the timing was just right to set up a sector focused strategy for the domestic landscape. And that's when I joined hands with my co-GP Justin Sriram Keeling, and we both decided to embark on the adventure of launching a fund. We launched the fund in January 2020. We did our first close in August, And we did our final close last year. So, very fortunate to have closed the fund, which was oversubscribed, and we closed it 6 months ahead of schedule. We have since then seen about 1,000 plus companies, but we've maintained a very disciplined pace of deployment. We're already 50% deployed. We want to create a portfolio of 15 companies. We have already invested in 8. You listed some of them. So we've done investments in companies like Loco, Bombay Play, LOLO, Creator Club, Studio Sira, All Star Games, to just name a few. And we're seeing some very interesting traction and trajectories of these companies. And we're very excited for the future of interactive and gaming in India.
Congratulations on pioneering the fund which is focused on gaming and interactive entertainment, and seems like entrepreneurship in it's in family's DNA. And yeah, it looks like you were able to connect the dots as well with your experience in starting a company in gaming industry and then working for the fund that is focused on gaming. And what's the the overall thesis you have for India, and when do you come in, what kind of check sizes do you write, and what's the the vision or the magical outcome you have for Lumikai Fund?
Yeah. So, when we were launching the fund, we heard a lot of narratives around the India market. We heard narratives like, oh, India's just a Dow farm. Indians don't pay for games. There's no depth in the market in terms of deal flow. How will you exit companies? India can't justify a sector focused interactive strategy. But we believed that the best time to invest in a sector is when it violates narratives. And we had seen key market inflection points. And since we launched the fund in August 2020, we have now since then seen about $2 billion infused in the Indian games market. We have seen 3 unicorns. We have seen multiple global gaming strategics um, invest in the market by acquisition or by just pure play investments. And we've seen the emergence of north of 800 plus game developers, which is up from 25 3 years back. And our thesis essentially was that game usage, gaming adoption, gaming infrastructure, and monetization were converging in the market in a manner that has never been seen before. And we have seen similar trajectories in, let's say, markets like China, where there is where if you look back in the history of, let's say, the Chinese interactive ecosystem between 2004 and 2007, 80% of the revenues and 70% of the titles came from foreign game publishers. In less than 3 years, 60% of the revenues started to pivot towards Chinese developers. And there were 6 to 7 levers that shifted the market. And we saw those levers happen in the India market as well. And that was our thesis, that these levers will take place. The first is smartphone proliferation and cheap data, which will encourage mass market adoption of gaming. The second was around payment infrastructure and payments, electronic payments in its sense, evolving to a point where now digital transactions account for nearly 40% of total transaction volume. In fact, India is now topping and beaten China in real time payment transactions, right? We also noticed that the government's rallying cry around Atmanirbhar Bharat, to build games, to build apps for India, from India, for the world, was also a similar pattern that the CCP and the Chinese youth organizations had launched back in 2004, 2005, where they saw that this was a great way to build the ecosystem together. And now that's been validated, because for the first time, the Indian budget called for a task force and called for the AVGC, which was the Animation Video Games task force, to be set up to promote the sector. And we also saw the capital infusion, where we saw both strategics as well as the capital markets now support gaming as an asset class in itself. And all of this has transpired in a very short period of time, and this is where inflection points happen, right? This is where markets just explode, and then it becomes games mainstream. And And that's what's happened to gaming. 24 months back, when we would come in and we would talk about gaming as an asset class, there was still few skeptical faces in a room. Now that's changed. Now people are like, oh, this is so exciting, this is hot, the sector has strong tailwinds. And as Lumikai, we've spent a lot of time educating the market. We've spent a lot of time talking about how this is a investable class in venture capital. We have since then seen three, four of our key hypotheses play out. And of course, we've been very blessed with the timing in terms of the pandemic hitting, and of course, the digital revolution and the digital acceleration that happened in India, accelerated the mainstreaming of gaming. Of course, and now India has consumes about 10 billion gaming apps a year, and we're 17% of the mobile gaming downloads. So, definitely there's been a sea of change.
Absolutely. Gaming in India is booming, and Loco is on fire. In fact, I'm going to have Anirudh on the podcast soon, probably either later this week or next week. And Saloni, what's the best part about your job?
Oh, that's a good one. I guess living vicariously through entrepreneurs. They say those who can't build VC, so perhaps that's the best part. But no, just kidding. Having been a founder and having been in the trenches, it's being an entrepreneur is probably one of the toughest jobs in the world, and it's an incredibly hard and stressful life. And as a founder, the odds are against you. You have to be a visionary, an artist, a soldier, an inspiration, and a worker bee all in the same person. And I think as a VC, you have the ability to see various founder archetypes and learn from different ways of building a business through different approaches and different, but yet for us, related sectors. But I think it is that ability to be able to, spend your time being inspired by these people who are fighting against all odds and who are building incredibly who are incredibly ambitious, who have these large visions, who are very persistent, very tenacious. And I think that's the most rewarding, but also the best part about the job.
Yeah, and now you're in a sense you're a founder again, right? You're raising a fund, and it was a journey from scratch. And how was that like?
It was exhilarating and challenging at the very and at the same time. And of course, you're right. We are Lumikai, as we are general partners, me and my co-GP, and we're founder VCs, also having been operators, having been founders. So this is to some extent, second startup. But I guess the nature of business is very different, and while complexity is very different as well, because now this is about fund management. It's about knowing your asset class, knowing about portfolio diversification. This is a very hardcore finance, and venture capital is a little bit different and distinct. And running a VC fund is very distinct from running a company. Um, and I think just the journey of raising a fund during a pandemic was quite challenging, because of course you were building these connections and you were going out there and asking investors to invest money in you, and it's an illiquid asset class, and it's going to be locked up for a period of 10 to 12 plus years, and that's a very large ask. And I think both me and my co-GP were very fortunate that we had an existing network, and because we were so sector focused, we were able to leverage our existing networks and bring on board an all-star cast of LPs who've backed us. These are some of the world's largest and iconic gaming media conglomerates from across the world, from Asia, from the US, from Europe, and family offices who have decided to back us, which is again also very unusual for a first time fund. Typically, first time funds have a lot more individual investor capital. For us, we have
Mhm.
a handful of individuals in the fund. all our other capital corpus is essentially institutional. And that in itself means that the rigors of running a fund, the expectations of running a fund, are much higher. You have to be much more sophisticated in terms of your reporting, in terms of your structuring, in terms of the kind of bets that you do, in terms of the price discipline that you maintain, because it's the threshold and the bar for which you're being compared with other funds is obviously very, very high. And that in itself is also a challenge, and we're punching above our weight. We're still a small fund, and we do very early stage bets. We typically do pre-seed, seed bets, to some extent series A, but mostly it's the former two stages of investment. We've And our typical ticket size is around, as low as $400,000 to as high as about 1.5 million, with then capital for follow on and reserve. In our first fund, we're looking to build a portfolio of 15 companies. We've already done 8, and over the course of the next year, we're in deep dive conversations with further companies. So we hope to be soon on our way to the next fund post this. So yeah.
No, and I'm sure founders would love to work with you, collaborate with you, especially when you're investing in pre-seed and seed, and you bring that operating experience with you, and that's what they need the most at the earliest stage. And what's the hardest part about your job?
I think it's a couple of things. There are many hard parts of the job. I think the biggest and the hardest challenge for me as an investor is about how do you uh, beat your own mental the limitations or the mental constraints that you have, whether it comes to battling biases and prejudices, or even FOMO when it comes to investing. The hard part is being a contrarian when the market is completely leaning one way and staying true to your course. This happened a lot of times, especially when we were launching the fund, and everybody told us we were crazy to be launching a sector focused strategy in the India market for the reasons I named before. But we stayed true to our course. Being Another very key and difficult part is being comfortable with being uncomfortable, and that is especially true when you're investing in a nascent asset class. Like, there is no playbook for investing in gaming and interactive in India. There hasn't been anybody who's done this before. There haven't been successful role models in terms of how you come into the market, how do you catalyze it, how do you educate it, how so we're learning and we're building and we're laying the blocks and we're building the blocks as we go along for this sector. So that there is a certain discomfort in that, and how do you be comfortable in that, and that's very important. And of course, discovering how not to judge yourself too harshly, or not to lose your self-esteem when you make the wrong investment calls or miss out on the next big unicorn, because the errors of omission are far, far more hurtful than the errors of commission, right? It's the deals that you miss rather than the deals that you do, which don't turn out well. So this is all, I think, par for the course of being a venture investor. I've been a VC investor, but that was never my own fund corpus. But now, as a founder VC and a founder GP, I think these are challenges which keep you up at night, and which I particularly grapple with a lot.
So, you were in UK, you worked in banking, founded a startup in gaming, and then worked at a fund, and of course you were able to connect the dots, and you saw that it's going to happen in India. It's just inevitable. Why not just me go there and just build it out, right? And so, in hindsight, Saloni, were there any experiences that you think were very valuable in UK that you brought with you in India, and it could become valuable?
Yeah, definitely. I think there were three things, right? One was a sector focus, because and I have seen now the sector for over a decade, right? I've seen it evolve in various markets. So having that sector focus, having that domain expertise has done two things. One, I've seen what works and what doesn't work in the global markets. To some extent, that leads to some level of pattern recognition, which you should utilize, but and you should learn how to harness it, but of course not stay too committed to it, because the India market is very different from that of the global market. So how do you map those trends, and then use the best of it to the India market? And that's incredibly important. But the second more important part is just having a global network, right? What we bring to our founders is, within 2 degrees of separation or 1 degree of separation, is our ability to reach out to anybody in the games industry and the interactive industry across the world, whether it's game designers, whether it's whether it's tech talent, whether it's data scientists, whether it's performance marketing experts, whether it's advisors, mentors, financiers, other VCs. And that has helped me in very good stead in helping our founders as well. And I think that's been incredibly valuable, is just being able to map global trends, seeing global best practices, having these global networks, and bringing that to the market here to be able to help the founders to the best of our abilities. And that's been very useful.
Gotcha. And we'll switch gears here. Look, building a fund from scratch and then sourcing, and then of course even harder is picking. And of course, the journey is hard. It's super hard. When you feel overwhelmed, unfocused, and things are not going the way that you've envisioned them to go, what frameworks do you use to be able to get back on track?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. So one is, what are the mental models that you have, that you apply day to day on your job, and what you bring to your work, and how do you turn up as an individual every day at your job? And that's a mental model that you have. I think more importantly is, how do you get yourself back in equilibrium? How do you center yourself in the short term when you get agitated, or you get emotional, or you feel some level of instability? And I use a very short practice. It's a meditation practice, actually. It's a 20-minute practice. It's called the dynamic mind practice. It's called the DMP. And it's evolved by a global facilitator and a coach, and she used to be advisor, coach, and trainer with McKinsey and Company for a very long time. And she cultivated this program for mindset and capability transformation. So, I would highly recommend it to anybody who wants to do better stress management and relieve yourself from the day to day, physical and mental and emotional tensions that all of us have, especially in a world where we are constantly connected. And we very rarely have time to do detoxes from a digital, device perspective. It's just a fantastic practice. It's available as an app on the app stores, and you should read about it. It's very scientific about the way it affects your brain waves, and how it brings calm into your life, in just a span of like 20 odd minutes. But that's a shorter quick fix that I leverage.
Certainly, I'll check the app out. And so, what do you do outside of work? What's the life like?
Um, it is try and be as active as possible. So, I play sport, whether it's badminton, or whether it's yoga. I have an active life. And I really enjoy my books and my reading. I spend a lot of time reading. So, and I have a interest, whether it's everything from sci-fi to fantasy to autobiographies to business books. It's so I like to have at least a wide range of uh, reading of books and materials that I like to absorb. So life outside of work, I think it's is mostly, at least being able to take some time out in the evenings or in the mornings, to be able to just pull yourself out of the day-to-day grind, and just being able to reflect. So any activity which helps me do more of that is something, whether it's a walking, it's a jog, it just any one of these activities. Regular meditation practice, of course, is very important to me. But it's a combination of things.
Yeah, stay mentally, physically, and emotionally fit.
Yeah.
And if money and attention are not needed anymore, what would you work on?
Um, I would probably, I would like to teach, and I would like to give back. There were individuals in my life, particularly when I was growing up, and also in business school. I went to business school. Who really influenced and shaped me. And I find that if you have good teachers, it can really change the trajectory of your life, or it can help you develop certain interests. And I do see myself, hopefully in the long term, I would like to teach. So I'd like to be teaching. Maybe it's MBA or university. I do some guest lectures at and some panels back in my business school, but perhaps it could be something that I would think about more seriously.
Got it. And so we know you because of an entrepreneur, now a fund manager. What do your friends know you for?
Well, they know me. They know a little bit about me, which is not out there. It is on for writing. I used to actually write an anonymous parody blog on investment banking when I used to be in the industry. I got interviewed by the Guardian and was featured and profiled anonymously, of course. But that was a tongue-in-cheek look of life as an investment banker and a female M&A banker back in the city in London. So yeah.
Love it. Saloni, thanks a lot for making the time to come on the podcast, and I'm very excited for you and the team at Lumikai. What's ahead for you all?
Well, thank you so much for having me. It was such a pleasure.